She didn't cry when she lost. She waited. Waited until she was off the court, away from the cameras, away from the crowd, away from everyone who had just watched her collapse. And then, alone, she let it out. A 19-year-old girl from the Philippines, sitting somewhere in North Carolina, crying over a tennis match that she had already won. At least, she thought she had won it. She had the first set. She had the momentum. She had everything. And then, in the space of about 40 minutes, it was gone. Not gradually. Not slowly. All at once. Like a door slamming shut. That moment, that specific brutal gut-wrenching moment, became the most important thing that ever happened to Alex. Not because it broke her, but because of what she did with it after. Here's what nobody tells you about the players who eventually become great. It's never the wins that shape them. It's always the loss they can't forget. The one that plays on loop. The one they replay at 3 in the morning when they can't sleep. The one that makes them get up the next morning and walk back onto the practice court even when every part of them wants to stay in bed. Alex had one of those losses. And for 2 years, she carried it everywhere she went. To every practice session, to every tournament, to every match she played on the entire professional circuit. It sat in the back of her mind like a stone. Heavy, quiet, and completely unmovable. But here's the thing about stones like that. Sooner or later, you either learn to carry the weight, or it buries you. What Alex did with hers is the reason we're talking about her today. Let's go back to 2024. August. A tournament in North Carolina that, under any other circumstances, nobody outside the tennis world would ever care about. Alex, 19 years old, ranked 147 in the world, walks onto the court and does something that shocks everyone watching. She takes the first set 6-3 against a player who has been on the tour for nearly a decade. Renata Zarazua, world number 104 at the time, a veteran from Mexico who had seen everything the women's tour could throw at her. And for one set, Alex makes her look ordinary. The crowd starts paying attention. People start whispering. Who is this kid? Where did she come from? What is happening right now? And then Zarazua does what veterans do. She stops panicking. She slows the game down. She starts making Alex play one more ball, then one more after that. And Alex, who is 19 and has never been in that position before, starts feeling it. The nerves. The pressure. The weight of being so close to something she's never had before. And it shows. 3-6. 6-4. 6-3. Final score. Zarazua wins. Alex loses. And not just loses. She loses a match she was winning. That's the part that haunts you. Not the defeat itself. The nearness of the victory. The knowledge that you had it and let it go. Alex flew home, and she didn't talk about it much publicly. But what she did do was work. Quietly, relentlessly, obsessively. She went back to the practice court and she worked on everything. Her serve. Her movement. Her composure in tight moments. Especially her composure. Because that was the thing Zarazua had exposed. Not her technique. Not her athleticism. Her nerves. Her ability, or rather her inability at that point, to hold it together when the match was on the line. You can teach someone to hit a forehand. You cannot teach someone to stay calm when the entire match is sitting on one point and the crowd is silent and the weight of the moment is pressing down on everything. That's something you can only learn by going through it. And Alex went through it. Over and over and over again. Then something strange happened in 2025. Something that, if you were writing this story as fiction, you would probably cut because it sounds too convenient, too cinematic, too perfectly constructed for narrative purposes. But it happened. At the French Open, Alex and Zarazua teamed up. Women's doubles. Roland Garros. Two players who had competed against each other, who knew every detail of each other's game, decided to become partners. They reached the second round together. Think about what that means for a second. Think about the conversations they must have had. The hours on the practice court, reading each other's shots, calling out tendencies, building trust. Zarazua was no longer just the woman who had beaten Alex. She became something more complicated than that. Someone Alex had to understand deeply, had to respect entirely, had to work alongside. And in doing that, Alex learned something about Zarazua that you can only learn when you're on the same side as someone. She learned exactly how she thinks. Exactly how she competes. Exactly what makes her dangerous. File that away. Because it becomes important later. By the time 2026 arrives, Alex is a different player. The numbers tell part of the story. Ranked 32 in the world. A 9-3 record on grass in the current season alone. But numbers never tell the whole story. The real story is what happens in Birmingham in early June. Alex enters the WTA 125 event there and fights through a 3-set final against Nikola Bartonova, coming back from a set down to win 5-7, 6-3, 7-5. Her first career title on grass. On a surface that, for most of her career, she was still learning. And the way she does it matters more than the fact that she does it. She's a set down. She could panic. She could tighten up. She could revert to being the 19-year-old in North Carolina who felt the match slipping and couldn't stop it. Instead, she resets. She finds something inside herself and she pulls it forward. She wins the second set cleanly. Then she wins the third. And when it's over, she doesn't look relieved. She looks settled. Like she expected this. Like she knew it was coming. That's the detail that should scare every player on the women's tour. Not the result. The expression on her face after. But even Birmingham is just the opening act. Because then she goes to Berlin. Wild card entry. No expectations. No pressure. Just Alex and a racket and a draw full of players ranked far above her. First round. She beats Donna Vekic. Queen's Club champion. Clean win. People notice, but they don't panic. Vekic can be inconsistent. Maybe it's just a bad day for her. Fine. Then the second round happens. And this is the moment where the story stops being about a promising player and starts being about something else entirely. Elena Rybakina. World number 2. Reigning Australian Open champion. 2022 Wimbledon champion. On her best surface, in the middle of her best stretch of form, against a wild card who most analysts expected to win maybe one round. Alex beats her 6-7, 5-6-4. The tennis world goes quiet for a second. Then loud. Very loud. Because you don't beat Rybakina on grass by accident. You don't stumble into that result. You earn it through precision, through nerve, through an ability to construct points under pressure that most players on the tour simply don't have. And Alex does it with something that looks almost like calm. Like she belongs there. Like the moment isn't too big. Like none of this is surprising her. But wait. Because she's not done. Quarterfinals. Alina Svitolina. World number 8. Alex wins 6-3, 6-4. 2 top 10 players. Back to back. On grass. As a wild card. The semi-final run that follows is enough to push her ranking to the edge of the top 32. And when world number 9 Vika Azarenka withdraws from Wimbledon with a knee injury, Alex gets bumped up. Seed 29. The first Filipino in the history of Wimbledon, across both the amateur and the open eras, to earn a seeded place in the singles draw. Read that sentence again. Not the first Filipino this year. Not the first Filipino in recent memory. The first. Ever. In the entire history of the tournament. The weight of that fact is enormous. But here's what makes Alex different from most players carrying that kind of weight. She doesn't seem crushed by it. She seems fueled by it. There's a version of this story where the history of the moment is too much. Where the Filipino flags in the stands, the cameras, the expectations of an entire nation, the magnitude of being first, becomes a burden so heavy that it collapses under its own weight. That version of the story has been told before. Many times. About many players from many countries who carried national expectations into Grand Slams and crumbled. This version is different. June 30th, 2026. Wimbledon. Court 12. Alex walks out and the stands are a sea of red, white, and blue. Filipino flags everywhere. The noise is extraordinary for a match that isn't on center court. And across the net, standing there, is Renata Zarazua. The same player. The same surface type. Grass both times, or close enough. The same moment on the line. Everything that happened in North Carolina 2 years ago exists in this space between them. Both of them know it. The crowd knows it. Everybody watching knows it. And then the match starts. Alex comes out hitting. Not tentatively, not cautiously, not with the nervous energy of a player trying too hard. With precision. Like she's been here before. Like this is just the next match in a sequence of matches she's been building toward her entire career. The first set unfolds and the difference from 2 years ago is immediately visible. 2 years ago, Alex had the first set in North Carolina and you could see the tightness creeping in as the match went on. A slight hesitation before the second serve. A tendency to go safer with the cross-court forehand rather than going for the line. The small, almost invisible signs of a player who knows they're winning and is starting to think about protecting the lead rather than extending it. None of that is present today. She breaks Zarzua's serve with authority. She holds her own with ease. She plays each point like it exists in isolation, like the score doesn't matter, like the history doesn't exist, like the only thing in the world is the ball coming across the net and what she chooses to do with it.
First set, Alex.
The crowd erupts. But here's where it gets interesting. Because Zarazua doesn't fold. She never has. That's what she did in North Carolina, and it's what she does here.
She digs in.
She extends rallies. She starts making Alex work for every single point in the second set, refusing to give anything away, turning the match into a grinding physical battle of will and endurance and nerve. And the second set is genuinely a war. Both players holding serve. Both players trading heavy ground strokes from the baseline. The tension in the crowd is almost physical. You can feel it through the screen if you're watching. Every point lands with a gasp or a cheer or complete silence depending on who won it. And here is the moment that defines everything. The moment that separates this Alex from the Alex who stood in North Carolina 2 years ago and felt the match slipping away. There's a point in the second set, deep into a long rally, where Zarazua hits a ball to Alex's backhand corner that is genuinely difficult. A ball that 2 years ago might have caused a slight hesitation, a slightly defensive response, a fraction of doubt leaking into the shot.
Alex doesn't hesitate.
She steps into it, drives the ball down the line with pace and precision, and wins the point.
It's 1 point.
It means nothing in isolation. But in context, it means everything. Because it shows that the ghost of North Carolina is gone.
Not managed. Not suppressed. Gone.
She's not playing despite the memory. She's playing free of it. She closes out the second set.
Match over. Straight sets. The stadium detonates.
Thousands of people on their feet simultaneously. The Filipino flags waving in every direction. People crying in the stands. Alex standing at the net, racket in hand, looking up at the crowd with an expression that is not triumphant in a loud theatrical way. It's quieter than that. Like satisfaction. Like something that has been unfinished for 2 years has finally been finished properly. She wins the handshake. She does her box celebration. She writes the camera message. And then she's in the press room, and she's talking about the match, and she's asked about what this win means in context of that loss 2 years ago, and she says something that is simple and completely honest. She says she's carried that match with her for a long time. And now she can put it down.
There it is. There's the line.
That's the whole story in one sentence. A girl who carried a loss for 2 years. Put it down on court 12 at the All England Club. And the tennis world watched it happen.
But we're not done.
Because the moment the celebration begins, the whispers start. And the whispers all have the same name in them.
Serena.
Serena Williams. 23 Grand Slam singles titles. The most decorated tennis player of the modern era. 44 years old. Playing her first Wimbledon singles match in 4 years after accepting a wildcard. If she comes through her first round match, she plays Alex in the second round. Sit with that for a moment. A 21-year-old from the Philippines, the first Filipino seed in Wimbledon history, against the greatest of all time, in her return to the most iconic stage in the sport. There is no script for this. There is no historical precedent. There is nothing in the entire archive of Wimbledon that quite looks like this. Before the tournament even started, Alex was asked about the possibility of that matchup in a press conference. And she said that just being in the same draw as Serena, competing at the same time, is something she can barely believe. She said the possibility of facing her is incredible. She said it with the kind of genuine awe that is rare from professional athletes who are trained to present cool detachment from the idea of playing the biggest names. Alex didn't bother pretending. She said it was incredible and she meant it. But incredible doesn't mean frightening. And watching Alex walk off court 12 after that win over Zarazua, you get the sense that the word frightening doesn't really apply to her anymore in the way it once did. She's already beaten world number 2 this year. She's already beaten world number 8. She's already won a title on grass. She's already been the first. She's already carried a ghost for 2 years and set it down. What exactly is she supposed to be afraid of? The analysts were ahead of this. Greg Rosetsky, 1997 Wimbledon quarterfinalist, had already gone on record saying he expected Alex to win her first round and set up a second-round collision with Serena. He said it like it was inevitable. Tracy Austin, 2-time US Open champion, had broken down exactly what makes Alex dangerous on grass. The lefty slice serve that creates uncomfortable angles. The ability to construct points rather than just hitting through them. The net game that was sharpened during her doubles work at Roland Garros, work she did, you remember, alongside Zarazua herself. And now those same weapons had been on full display for 90 minutes on court 12. The tennis world had a preview. And what it saw was a player who doesn't look like a seed who got lucky because of a withdrawal. She looks like a seed who earned it and then immediately proved it. And here's the detail that should make every draw analyst nervous when they look at Alex's section of Wimbledon. Iga Swiatek is in her draw. 5-time Grand Slam champion.
Former world number 1.
A player Alex has beaten before. Jasmine Paolini is in her draw. A player Alex has beaten before. The path through this tournament is difficult.
Brutally difficult.
But brutal difficulty is, at this point, kind of Alex's signature. She walked into Berlin as a wild card. She walked out with wins over the 2nd and 8th best players in the world. Nobody handed her any of that.
She took it.
And the question the tennis world is now sitting with, the question that is going to define the next week of Wimbledon, is simple and almost impossible to answer.
How far does this go?
Because 2 weeks ago, the question was whether Alex could hold her ranking. Whether the Berlin results were a flash of brilliance or a genuine signal. Whether the Birmingham title on grass was real or just good timing. She answered that. Today on court 12, in front of 1,000 Filipino flags and a crowd that understood exactly what it was watching, she answered it completely. But the answers keep producing bigger questions. And maybe that's the most exciting thing about following a player like Alex at this exact moment. Every time you think you understand the ceiling, she does something that makes you realize you were thinking too small. She was 19 and heartbroken in North Carolina. She was the unseeded teenager watching a lead disappear and not knowing how to stop it. She was the girl who waited until she was alone to cry. And now, at 21, she's seeded 29 at Wimbledon. She's the first of her kind in the history of this tournament. She's walking off court 12 with a straight sets victory over the woman who once broke her heart, and she's talking in press conferences about how incredible it is to potentially face Serena Williams. The circle of that is almost too clean to be real.
But it is real.
Every part of it is real. The loss was real. The 2 years of work were real. The Birmingham title was real. The Berlin run was real. The Wimbledon seed was real. And the win today, the one that closed the loop on everything, the one that let her finally put the stone down, that was absolutely real. There's a version of this story that ends today, with the celebration on court 12 and the flags and the tears and the history already made. And even that version is extraordinary. Even just the fact of today, the win, the seed, the first Filipino, the full circle moment against Zarazua, even if this was the end of the story, it would still be one of the most remarkable individual days in the history of Filipino sport. But here's what you need to understand about Alex. Today was not the end of anything. Today was the opening chapter. And the next chapter might involve the greatest to ever play this game, on the most iconic court in the world, in a match that nobody could have scripted because nobody would have dared. 2 years ago, she sat alone somewhere in North Carolina and cried. Today, she walked off the most famous grass in the world as a winner, as history, as someone the entire tennis world is now watching with a kind of attention that doesn't go away.
The stone is down. The ghost is gone.
And Alex is just getting started.